Imagine a silent museum in the heart of Dresden, Germany. A vault so secure, so obsessively protected, that even the most seasoned thieves whispered its name like myth. Steel doors, laser grids, motion sensors that could detect the flicker of a moth's wings. The Green Vault, home to the treasures of Saxon kings, a glittering testament to Europe's golden age of wealth, craft, and pride. And yet, one foggy dawn in November 2019, the impossible happened. 8 minutes. That's all it took to humiliate centuries of security, technology, and human confidence. 8 minutes to turn one of the world's most impenetrable museums into a stage for the boldest art heist of the 21st century. The alarm blared. Cameras caught only shadows. By the time police arrived, the thieves had vanished, leaving behind nothing but shattered glass and a question that echoed through history. How could something so secure fall so fast? But that's the story of humanity, isn't it? Every wall we build, someone learns to climb. Every lock we design, someone learns to pick. Security is never absolute. It's just a temporary victory in our endless dance between creation and destruction. What fascinates me about this heist isn't just the crime. It's what it reveals about us, about ambition, about risk, about the fragile balance between genius and greed. Because the Dresden Green Vault wasn't robbed by fools. It was robbed by men who studied history, timing, and human psychology. They knew that power isn't about what you lock away. It's about understanding how others guard it. In those 8 minutes, they didn't just steal jewels. They stole the illusion of safety itself. Let's zoom out, because that's what I always do. When we step back, this isn't just a story about one museum or one night. It's the continuation of an ancient human pattern. We create systems to preserve our treasures, and others rise to test them. From the tomb raiders of ancient Egypt, to the bank robbers of the industrial age, to the cyber criminals of our own time, the game never ends. Only the tools change. And maybe that's why this story hits so deep, because it reminds us that civilization itself is a vault. We build it out of trust, laws, technology, believing that what we value most is safe. But every so often, someone walks through the shadows, cuts the wires, and shows us the truth. Security is a story we tell ourselves, nothing more. As dawn broke over Dresden that morning, the guards stood in disbelief. The vault door, once thought unbreachable, hung open like a wound. On the marble floor, shards of display glass sparkled beneath the pale light. And somewhere, far away, in a nondescript car speeding down a German highway, a handful of men carried pieces of history worth over 100 million euros, and a symbol of something even more valuable, the triumph of human audacity. Before it became a crime scene, the Green Vault was a statement, not just of wealth, but of human ambition itself. Built in the early 18th century by Augustus the Strong, Elector of Saxony and King of Poland, it was more than a room of jewels. It was a temple of power. A declaration that beauty and order could be forged by human hands, and that civilization itself could be displayed in crystal and gold. Picture it, mirrored walls reflecting candlelight into infinite brilliance, diamonds the size of thumb bones glimmering in perfect symmetry, emeralds cut with royal precision. The very air inside felt sacred, as if history itself were holding its breath. But Augustus didn't just want to own treasure. He wanted to immortalize himself through it. He named it the Green Vault, after the green malachite paint that coated its columns, a color meant to symbolize life and eternity. Every piece, every artifact was chosen to tell a story about the rise of human mastery over nature, over chance, over time. And as centuries passed, the vault endured. It survived wars, invasions, and bombings. When Dresden was flattened during World War II, much of the city burned. But the treasures of the Green Vault were hidden, protected, preserved. Generations rebuilt it, piece by piece, as a monument not just to art, but to resilience. By the 21st century, the Green Vault had become more than a museum. It was a fortress disguised as beauty. Modern security wrapped around it like armor. Laser sensors across corridors. Motion detectors beneath floors. Reinforced glass so thick it could stop a bullet. Cameras watching from every conceivable angle. It was the kind of place you'd describe as impossible to rob. Every journalist said it. Every curator believed it. It became a legend of invincibility, a modern-day pyramid. And that's where irony finds its sharpest edge, because the moment something becomes unbreakable, that's when someone begins to plan how to break it. That's human nature. The stronger the fortress, the more irresistible the challenge. For the thieves who targeted Dresden, this wasn't about money. Not really. It was about outsmarting the system, about proving that human ingenuity could still outpace technology. They weren't amateurs. They studied blueprints, memorized guard rotations, timed response delays. They watched from the shadows, patiently learning the habits of the keepers who trusted the fortress too much. And that's the paradox of progress. The more secure we make something, the more fragile it becomes. Because it teaches us to relax, to trust the illusion. Security isn't just about locks and sensors. It's about vigilance. And the moment we forget that, the story writes itself. When I look at the Green Vault today, I don't see just a museum or a crime scene. I see a mirror It reflects everything about civilization: our brilliance, our arrogance, our unending desire to defy limits. Augustus the Strong built it to prove human greatness. 300 years later, a handful of men proved that greatness can be undone in 8 minutes flat. But before we get to that night, before we step into the rain, the flicker of headlights and the silence before the storm, we must understand the men who did it. Not monsters, not masterminds. Just humans driven by the same ancient hunger that built, and broke empires. That's where we go next. They didn't come out of nowhere. They came from the edges, the forgotten corners of society, where survival sharpens into something more primal. The men who robbed the green vault weren't the kind of criminals you'd see in movies with sleek suits and foreign passports. They were locals, members of the Remo clan, a family network in Berlin with roots deep in the underworld. A group known not for chaos, but for precision. And that's what makes this story so disturbingly human. They weren't magicians. They didn't use some Hollywood gadget. They studied, they observed, they waited. For months, maybe years, they mapped every detail. The museum's layout, the timing of guards, even the police patrol cycles in Dresden's historic center. They knew that power doesn't just lie in weapons or wealth. It lies in information. In a sense, this was their version of art, a meticulous choreography of patience, intelligence, and nerve. They discovered the museum's Achilles heel, an electrical junction box outside the building, hidden in plain sight, like all great vulnerabilities. On the morning of November 25th, 2019, before dawn touched the Elbe River, they set that box ablaze. One spark, and Dresden's security cameras blinked into darkness. The city's grid went blind. Timing became everything. The blackout wasn't just a distraction. It was the opening note of a symphony they had rehearsed in silence. Within minutes, a sleek Audi S6 glided through the cobblestone streets toward the Residenzglas, the royal palace. 2 men stepped out. Dressed in black, their movements calm, precise, almost surgical. They cut through an iron grill with a power saw, smashed a single window pane, and slipped inside. Not through the front, but through history itself. That's the thing about human innovation. It always creates opportunities for those who study its limits. The thieves weren't fighting against technology. They were using it. They knew exactly how long it would take for motion sensors to trigger, how quickly the police would respond, and how to vanish before the system rebooted. 8 minutes. That's how much time they had between the first crack of glass and the sound of approaching sirens. 8 minutes to dismantle centuries of pride and protection. Inside, their target was clear. The jewel room, the very heart of the Green Vault, where the Saxon crown jewels gleamed beneath bulletproof glass. But glass is only as strong as the belief behind it. One swing of an axe shattered the illusion. In less than 90 seconds, they collected what historians once called the most valuable set of treasures in Europe. Diamonds, rubies, sapphires, and brooches that had belonged to kings. Not all of it could be sold. Most of it couldn't. The real value wasn't in the stones. It was in the act itself. They had humiliated a government, mocked a legacy, and proven that no fortress, however secure, could escape the reach of human audacity. When I think about it, it's less a crime and more a mirror reflecting the age-old tension between order and chaos. For every wall we build, someone's out there, waiting, watching, testing its strength. That's not just criminal instinct. That's human instinct. The same drive that built pyramids, launched rockets, and split atoms also whispers. What if we can go further? The thieves of Dresden didn't just break a lock. They broke an idea that security could ever be final, and once that illusion shatters, history starts to move again. There are moments in history when time stretches, when seconds feel like hours, and the world seems to hold its breath. 3:05 a.m., November 25th, 2019. In the heart of Dresden, the city sleeps under a mist of quiet rain. The Elbe River moves like liquid glass, and inside the royal palace, behind a web of alarms and cameras now gone dark, two figures move with surgical precision. They are not running, they are composed. Every step has been calculated, every sound rehearsed. This is not chaos, it's choreography. Inside the Green Vault, centuries of human artistry lie under crystal display. Diamonds cut under candlelight, gold sculpted for kings, each piece a fragment of a story about power, pride, and permanence. The men know exactly where to go. They've studied this room not just as thieves, but as students of human design. 3:06 a.m., one man smashes the glass case with an axe. Sound echoes through marble and metal like thunder in a cathedral. Shards explode outward, not just of glass, but of belief. The belief that these treasures were untouchable. They grab what they came for. The Dresden White Diamond, the breast star of the Polish Order of the White Eagle, the diamond epaulet worn by kings of Saxony. Each piece is both history and defiance. Priceless, yes, but also symbolic. These weren't just jewels, they were the embodiment of royal legacy, of centuries of craftsmanship that no modern world could replace. 3:08 a.m., they moved to the next case. Two more swings. They know exactly how many seconds they can afford. Every heartbeat measured, every movement rehearsed. The human mind, under pressure, doesn't think. It performs what it already knows. And that's what we see here, not improvisation, but instinct honed through obsession. Outside, the rain muffles the sounds. A bystander across the square sees only the faint flicker of flashlights behind the frosted glass. No one knows yet that history is being rewritten in real time by men whose names won't appear in museums, but whose shadows now stretch across them. 3:11 a.m. The duffel bags are half full. One man glances at his watch. 3 minutes left. They leave behind larger artifacts, too heavy to carry. They aren't greedy. They're disciplined. Greed is noisy. Precision is silent. 3:13 a.m. They retreat the same way they came. Window, courtyard, gone. In 8 minutes flat, the most secure museum in Europe becomes the site of one of the greatest art thefts in history. By the time police arrive, the museum is eerily quiet. The kind of silence that only comes after something irreversible has happened. Glass crunches under their boots as they enter. The empty cases stare back like hollow eyes. And on the security monitors, nothing, just static. It's easy to call it a robbery. But if you step back, as I always urge, what you see is a snapshot of humanity's paradox. We build temples of permanence, yet we live in a world where impermanence always wins. We treasure beauty, yet we risk everything to possess it. And beneath it all, there's that timeless tension between creation and destruction, law and defiance, order and chaos. 8 minutes. That's all it took to collapse centuries of confidence. And yet, in those same 8 minutes, the thieves etched themselves into the vast tapestry of human history. A story not of good or evil, but of audacity itself. Because history, if you look closely, isn't written by those who play it safe. It's written by those who dare to test the limits. Whether they build or whether they break. Dawn broke over Dresden like a confession. The mist clung low over the city's Baroque skyline, the spires of the Frauenkirche rising above the fog like ghosts of the past. But inside the royal palace, there was no poetry, only disbelief, the green vault, that fortress of history, that shrine of art lay wounded. Glass shattered, alarms still echoing, security guards pacing in shock. The world's most secure museum had fallen, not to war, not to fire, but to human ingenuity wrapped in black hoodies. By 6:00 a.m., the first headlines hit the wireless. Priceless treasure stolen from Dresden's green vault. Germany's crown jewels gone. The most secure museum robbed in 8 minutes. Cameras arrived before the police their sweep. Before I had finished their sweep. Journalists pressed their faces to the barriers, asking questions no one could answer. How did they get in? Why didn't the alarm stop them? Where were the guards? And behind every question, there was another, unspoken, uncomfortable. If this could happen here, in one of Europe's most secure institutions, what does that say about the world we've built? It was more than a robbery. It was a rupture in trust. Germany, a nation obsessed with precision, structure, and order, was forced to confront something primal, that control is an illusion. The museum director's voice trembled as he faced the cameras. He didn't talk about money. He talked about memory. These jewels, he said, part of our cultural soul. They survived wars, empires, and the bombing of Dresden. And now they're gone to greed and darkness. Well, he wasn't exaggerating. The loss wasn't just financial, it was existential. Each stolen piece was a thread in the tapestry of European history. Artifacts that told stories of craftsmanship, diplomacy, and ambition. They were fragments of identity, irreplaceable not just in value, but in meaning. By noon, the footage had gone viral. CCTV clips of hooded figures moving like phantoms through the green vault's halls. Every frame replayed endlessly on screens around the world, like a modern myth unfolding in real time. The world watched, not just fascinated, but unnerved. Because this wasn't supposed to happen anymore. This kind of story belonged to another century, the stuff of novels and folklore. But here it was, unfolding in an age of facial recognition, digital surveillance, and 21st-century control systems. And yet, with all our progress, the thieves had slipped through, unseen, untouchable, unstoppable. That's when it hit people. Maybe we've mistaken technology for safety. Maybe we've built systems so sophisticated that we've forgotten how fragile they really are. As investigators scored the scene, dusting fingerprints and tracing the burnt power box, the bigger question emerged: who could pull off something like this? So perfectly timed, so clinically executed. The answer would take months to surface, and when it did, it would reveal something even more unsettling. This wasn't a foreign conspiracy, nor a genius hacker's plot. It was local. It was human. It was us. That's what history always teaches, if we're willing to listen. The threats we fear most rarely come from beyond. They come from within. From the same brilliance that builds civilizations, the same imagination that paints cathedrals and crafts jewels, comes the urge to test, to challenge, to defy. And as Germany mourned its stolen treasures, the world couldn't look away. Because deep down, we all recognized ourselves in that vault, proud of what we've built, blind to how quickly it can vanish. After the smoke cleared and the world awoke to the unthinkable, the real story began. Not of jewels or vaults, but of pursuit. The green vault Heist had vanished into the early morning fog like a ghost. For the police, investigators, and historians alike, it became a hunt for shadows, a pursuit of human ingenuity disguised as crime. Germany's finest detectives converged on Dresden, combing every inch of the scene. Forensics teams dusted for prints, analyzed shards of broken glass, and traced the burnt wires of the sabotage. Every clue mattered. Yet every trail seemed to dissolve into mystery. It was as if the thieves had never been there. Phantoms dancing in the margins of a city that now questioned its very sense of security. The investigation revealed startling details. These weren't random acts of opportunism. They were methodical, patient, relentless. The thieves had studied the vault's architecture like historians. They understood electricity, cameras, motion sensors, even human routines. They were not just breaking into a museum. They were interrogating it, understanding its rhythms, finding its pulse, and then exploiting it. The law enforcement narrative became a suspense story in its own right. Tip-offs from informants, secret surveillance footage, and months of painstaking analysis led to Berlin. And there, the shadow network of the Remo clan, a family notorious for precision and silence, came into focus. They were not myth, but human, not monsters, but clever strategists, and yet their ambition transcended ordinary lawlessness. Here is the human truth at the heart of this chase. Every civilization that rises inevitably produces individuals willing to test its limits. The same curiosity, ingenuity, and audacity that invents, explores, and builds can also dismantle, steal, and subvert. It's not evil that drives history. It is human desire unbounded by conscience. The investigation became more than a hunt for thieves. It became a meditation on fragility, on how centuries of human creation, technology, and culture can be undone in a matter of minutes. The green vault, a symbol of permanence, had become a lens to examine the precariousness of all human endeavors. As months unfolded, some treasures were recovered, but not all. Some pieces vanished into the shadows of the black market, possibly never to return. And yet the impact wasn't measured in the stolen jewels alone. It was measured in the questions the world began to ask. How secure are our legacies? How fragile are our achievements? How well do we really understand the systems we create? In tracing shadows, we also trace ourselves. The Heist reminds of vigilance, that virtue, knowledge, and humility are inseparable from progress. We marvel at human ingenuity, yet we must respect its dual edge. We celebrate creation, yet we must reckon with destruction. For historians, philosophers, and citizens alike, the Dresden Green Vault Heist became a story not just of crime, but of reflection. It forced the world to ask if the most secure vault could be emptied in 8 minutes. What else might slip through the cracks of human confidence? And in that question, the Heist achieves a timeless significance, a mirror of civilization's fragile heartbeat. This is where we pause at the precipice of reflection. Next, we step beyond the immediate theft, beyond law enforcement, jewels, and criminals, to consider the deeper resonance of the event. Because the story of the Green Vault is also the story of civilization, itself brilliant, precarious, and always in motion. That is all it took to turn centuries of careful planning, artistry, and security into a memory. Shattered glass, empty cases, and a profound lesson etched into history. The Green Vault Heist is more than a crime. It is a mirror held up to civilization itself. Because if you step back, you realize the story isn't about thieves, alarms, or stolen diamonds. It is about human ambition, creativity, and the tension between fragility and resilience. Consider the treasures themselves. Each piece was a triumph of craft, an expression of human vision, a testament to centuries of knowledge and labor. Yet, despite their intrinsic value, their security depended entirely on trust. Trust in systems, in routines, in human diligence. The Heist exposed a universal truth. No system, no matter how brilliant, can fully contain human will. The will to challenge, to experiment, to defy. That is the duality of our species. We are creators and destroyers, builders and challengers, guardians and intruders. The same minds that design empires, vaults, and masterpieces are capable of finding their cracks. It is not merely greed or malice. It is curiosity, strategy, and audacity. And it is in that tension that history moves forward. For the public, the Heist awakened awe and fear. It sparked headlines, debates, and endless speculation. Yet the most profound lessons lie beneath the surface, in what we choose to see about ourselves. We must accept that every achievement is provisional, every legacy temporary, every victory a challenge waiting to be tested. Civilizations rise and fall not because of inevitability alone, but because human ambition is relentless. The Green Vault Heist also reminds us of resilience. Many treasures were recovered. The museum was rebuilt, the exhibits restored, and the lessons recorded. In this, we see that humanity does not surrender to failure or loss. We mourn, we study, we adapt, and we continue. Civilization is not static. It is an ongoing experiment, a story written in real time, sometimes in brilliance, sometimes in tragedy, but always forward. And there is a deeper philosophical echo here. Security is never final, control never absolute. What we can hold on to, what we can safeguard against all odds, is not things, but knowledge, wisdom, and the capacity to learn from history. We are defined less by what we own and more by how we respond when our assumptions are shattered. As we reflect on that night in Dresden, let us remember that history is not merely a sequence of events. It is a mirror of human nature, of curiosity, courage, and ingenuity. 8 minutes became legend not because of the Heist itself, but because it illuminated truths we often ignore, that we build, that we challenge, and that we endure. So, what does the Green Vault teach us? It teaches humility. Before systems, before technology, before pride. It teaches awe for human skill, daring, and creativity. It teaches vigilance, because the world is never still, and history waits for no one. And finally, it teaches this: every act of audacity, every collapse of expectation, every fleeting moment of triumph or failure is part of a larger story, the story of us. The story of civilization, fragile yet persistent, beautiful yet vulnerable, and endlessly alive. So let us stand, for history is speaking, not in alarms or headlines, but in the silent lessons of those 8 unforgettable minutes. Let us listen, and let us act with courage, wisdom, and vision. Because in the end, the Green Vault reminds us of something eternal humanity dares, humanity builds. And when the walls fall, we rise again, wiser, stronger, and more awake to the brilliance and fragility of the world we inherit. And with that realization, we step forward. Hearts racing, minds sharp, and eyes wide open, into the next chapter of our shared story. Standing ovation moment. In 8 minutes, the impossible became reality. But in the eternity that follows, what we do with that knowledge that defines history